I would now like to call on Mr. Darlington Omoruyi. Before Darlington speaks, I'm going to give you a brief outline of his bio. Darlington is the director of TAMSA Solutions, and he has previously worked closely with senior investment officials from state investment agencies such as sovereign wealth funds, central banks, pension funds, direct foreign investments, etc., from across the world to find solutions to investment challenges, including corporate governance issues. In Africa, Darlington has been involved in promoting the need for saving for development through the establishment of sovereign wealth funds. Darlington has also been involved in African investments and has worked with investment advisory firms, including private equity and commercial banks. He holds a master's degree in information management and finance and bachelor's in mathematics and economy. Darlington is going to be speaking, is going to share his, is going to be presenting on a topic called Understanding the Practice of Good Governance. So Darlington Omoruyi, you're welcome. You are muted.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for this great opportunity, and it's great seeing different faces come across either through research or in person, but great to see everyone here. And when I was told about this project to kind of speak on this matter, good governance, I asked myself, do I really have that much to say? But I realized that there were a few things that I have experienced in my life and in business. One of the key elements for me is to find a way to ensure, for me to understand what good governance is and what governance is. So I decided that this would be, it's a continuous journey, understanding the practice of good governance. It's understanding is a verb, so it's a continuous process. So let me share my screen. If you can see, I've got a slide to help me with my talk. Just a minute. Just put this up.
I think you can speak.
Okay, cool.
I will listen, please. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I'll just start with understanding good governance. Firstly, what is governance? And I'm great to hear Dr. Egiamosoy talk about the corporate governance and what they've been doing in their firm. So for me, I'll just say at the end of the day, governance is all about management, managing resources. It could be human resources, it could be capital, it could be fiscal assets, it could be intellectual assets. So governance is about management. And when you talk of good governance, in that instance, you're talking about managing resources for the benefit of all. So governance could be bad governance, it could be corporate governance, but once it's good governance, it's managing those resources for all. And like Dr. Egiamosoy did mention, you want to be able to ensure that everyone, every stakeholder in that business is happy with what you're doing. And to ensure this is possible, I'll say the key element of good governance boils down to two things. In my experience, it's about the process for making decisions that affect the use of the resources and the processes involved in implementing those decisions. So for me, good governance if you look at it, you just need to be aware that there are two aspects of ensuring good governance, which is decision-making process, which should be defined, and then implementing decision. So just to add, I'm going to be more theoretical and philosophical rather than practice. When you ask good governance, where do you have good governance? You have good governance everywhere we all live. Where there's two people involved, there's governance. There's always interrelations between how people react to each other. So there's a governing and there's a governed. So you need to understand that whenever that relationship exists, here is the form of governance, and how that governance is implemented is what is also very important. And To cite an example before we delve even further into this, I'll just give you, in the 1960s, two countries, probably 10 years apart, discovered crude oil and started exporting crude oil. And following that, one country decided to start saving, another country decided to spend at its need. These two countries, I'll just give you a clue. They both start with N. The two countries start with N, but they both export crude oil. And today, one of those countries is a developed country. It's a developed country. It's a country with one of the highest per capita income in the world, while the other is a developing country, still trying to get into the middle income country. But again, they took decisions, and decisions that they took over the years have come out with, the result is clear. So the point I'm trying to make is, in governance, decision making isn't so much of a problem. Decision to save for the future was a decision. Was it good? Was it bad? Who knows? Decision to spend on their need, was it good? Was it bad? Who knows? But the idea, the bottom line is, once a decision is made, the result is only seen at the end of the day, not with the decision. So the process of making the decision becomes very critical and important. How that decision was arrived at, and the process of implementing the decision becomes also very significant. Many times you have organizations, not just organizations, you have companies, you have countries, you even have families come up with a decision, and how that decision was made, no one can tell. No one can really understand where that decision has come from. And then that decision isn't even the problem. The problem now is how that decision is being implemented. Nobody can tell how it's been implemented, where it's been implemented. So that basically gives you an idea of what might happen. So if you're looking at good governance, the key point is to look at the process of decision making. It should be well defined. It should be clear to everyone. The process of implementing those decisions should be clear to everyone. And again, it's also for me about having that process in place. Once you have that process in place, you understand how that process works. It then becomes a lot easier for everyone to understand the relationship. I did mention that there are two parties involved in governance: the governed and the governing. And again, you can look at it from another perspective. There probably is a third leg. You can talk about the regulator. You can talk about the arbiter and those involved in all that. Even in the family, you can talk of the parents, the family, father, mother, kids, and all that. There's a governing situation there. The father might be, as Ignorance did mention, the leader, the mother, the leader. Then you can have the kids who are the governed, the governing and the governed. But one of the key elements that makes it a lot easier for everyone to interact is to have clarity in purpose and agreement, because many a times you have expectations from both sides, varied and different. I'll give you a personal story. A couple of years back, I had written an exam to go to a secondary school then, and eventually I was one of the few people that passed to go in there. Then my father wasn't at home, he traveled. So when he came back, I told him. He got the documentation from the school, he saw it all, and he called me aside. He said, "Sorry, you can't go to this school." I was angry, I was so upset, but later on he explained to me that the school fees was way too expensive, that there's no way he can afford it at the time, that he promises me that he would put me in a very good school, that once I'm done with that school.
Sorry, Darlington, your slides are on screen now. So
okay, I don't know how
what page do you want?
Just leave it on this page. This is just the page for me to talk on. So at the end of the day, he did explain to me, and we came to an agreement that he would find me a secondary school to go to. That once I get into the secondary school, then in the following year, he would get me to the school I wanted to go to. And we agreed, and I went to my first secondary school. I did well, and then the following year, I got into the school of my choice. What that taught me over the years, and reflecting on good governance, was the fact that he was able to explain. He was able to explain to me. I was able to understand where he was coming from. So where you have a division of understanding from the governing and the governed, you have problems. The expectations might be different. You probably think about a nation where the people expect the government to provide all their needs, and then you have the government who do not think that they are supposed to provide all their needs. So at the end of the day, the resources being managed would not be managed effectively. So one of the, like I said, one of the key elements is to ensure that there's clarity and agreement. And to ensure clarity and agreement, the people need to, there need to be a coming together and understanding of how the process for the decision has been made. What I'm trying to arrive at is, once that clarity is sought through the process of decision making. So if the government says we're going to spend money on healthcare, why are you spending money on healthcare? Is there a need for that? If the staff says we want salary increase, okay, why do you want salary increase? Can we discuss how that has come? If it's inflation, if it's because your company pays the least, or if management wants staff to work a little bit longer hours, what is the motivation? How did you arrive at that decision? Is it that new companies are now working longer hours, or there's a need, we are bringing in more resources, more materials that's needed for production? So you need to have that interaction to ensure that corporations and organizations move together, that the governed and the governing, their visions, their expectations are aligned. One of the key things I also realized in understanding the process of decision making and the process of decision implementation is the flexibility, that this group, these understanding the processes provide. I'll give you, as Dr. Higamusa said, risk minimization when you have the right corporate governance framework in place. But one of the key things is, once you have your decision-making process defined and implementation process defined, what it allows you to do is be flexible. The flexibility comes in if, for example, a decision has been taken, the process that allowed it come into place is right, but is taken, and then you realize something is going on. In that process of implementing, if that process is understood by everyone, someone can pinpoint issues that needs to be addressed. So it allows you to become flexible. So in that way, you do not go down into making a big mistake before you come back in. In the IT world, probably that's what they call agile. There's a room for flexibility, a room to allow for people to kind of make decisions, but you're able to change that decision because you have a process that you are following. So if you don't have that process, you're really in a very difficult.
Please mute yourself. Sorry, Darlington. Please mute yourself.
So when you're talking about the whole aspect, so you talk about decision implementation, because you've made a decision, you defined your process for implementing the decision, your process for defining the decision, or you define your process for the decision making. Once that has been defined, it's about decision implementation. And as I was saying, you have to have that process also defined within the organization. And that is where you can have adequate or proper audit if you're in an organization and if you're in a nation. So you have to have those things clearly stated. Otherwise, you have a situation whereby people or leadership would take decisions and they will want to implement it one way or in a different way from the laid down rule. If that process is not defined, it can create a lot of, there are risk factors to it. I would also cite examples. There are a couple of years ago, one of the leading private equity fund in the world had raised $5 billion to invest in Africa. And they went around looking for deals, looking for opportunities, and they unfortunately didn't find any. I think 3 years ago, they closed down that fund, having spent well over $500 million finding investments. They couldn't. And one of the reasons, like I said, is I don't know what their decision process was in making the decision to raise $5 billion for Africa. I don't know what their process was for implementing the decision. But however, they had very strong corporate governance. And I'll mention it's BlackRock, a probably the largest private equity fund in the world. But they did not succeed. I'm sure they have probably one of the best, one of the best corporate governance structure or good governance structure in for any company in its field. However, one thing about good governance, in my view, is that it should have an international face but a local fit. What that's basically trying to say is that it should understand the culture and the practice of wherever it is being operated. You cannot take a corporate governance approach that works in the UK and you implement that, say, in Zimbabwe, or you implement that, say, in Sao Tome and Principe. You might have some challenges. The same way you go to a fund in, say, Kiribati. Kiribati has a $600 million fund, and it's a country with less than 150,000 people. But this fund they've been serving for more than 70 years now. However, once you see their leadership, you won't even know that they are part of the leaders of the country, because they look like every other person you meet on the street, and then, which is quite an interesting thing. So for me, there's a need for understanding the cultural need and the people's perception in taking decisions when it comes to good governance or corporate governance. And that also brings us to what I would term some of the United Nations agreed definition of what good governance, the principles for good governance. And to them, they said it should involve consensus oriented. And that's basically seeking agreement from both parties, the governed and the governing. And then there's also the need for participation. People should be involved, then following the rule of law, effective and efficient, accountable and transparent. However, in my own take, could you go to the next slide, please? So, however, in my own take, these are what I would consider as 75%. If you have this in place in how decisions are taken within an organization, it should really help in promoting good governance. And for me, that includes accountability. So there needs to be accountability from both sides, either from the governing side and from the governed. Both sides need to be accountable to the goals, to the objective of the organization, to the goal, the objective of the country, of the home itself. Then there should be participation. There shouldn't be a gulf between the governed and the governing. When I say a gulf, I mean there should be a sense of ownership, sense of contribution to the plan, to the objective that the company or the organization or the nation is seeking. And then the issue of transparency is very key. If you've come up with I think transparency does actually fit into accountability, but you need to be able to show people what you're doing. Many a times we do not know what our leaders are doing. Many a times we do not know what the followers are doing. There's a big disconnect. At the end of the day, you basically have that lack of communication, which creates lack of transparency, which creates the challenge of and for good governance. And then fairness. Any decision that is taken should be fair, because the main objective of good governance is to ensure that resources are managed for the benefit of all. One of the key things that people forget is that you can decide to manage your stuff very efficiently to ensure that profit is the core of your business. However, your staff might not be happy because you're focusing on working them hard, slaving them, and making sure that you maximize the return of the business. However, you have other stakeholders who are the employees who needs to feel as part of the business, or feel like there's something coming to them as well. And communication. However, everything and anything you do, you should be able to communicate effectively. So in a way, this whole for me is kind of what constitutes 35% principles for good governance. There could be other things that you can look at. I think Dr. Hegamusa did mention one, which is diversity. You should have that level of diversity that it shows that you're basically taking opportunity of various people, divergent views, understanding where people are coming from otherwise. everyone will see a 6 instead of a 9. So we just need to kind of make sure that there's consistency in how this whole in how diversity work. So with this five, you can actually add to them if you feel that there's more to be added. And again, lastly, I just want to add, good governance in itself leads to making good decisions. Once you have good governance, leads to making good decisions, and that ensures that available resources is well managed. Once you have good governance, it then allows you to make good decisions, and which in turn allows you to manage resources more effectively and efficiently for the good of everyone. And where you don't have good governance, what would happen is you'll have definitely managed resources. However, it will be for the good of a few, which is basically what it is that we're seeing in certain countries across the world and certain businesses. So I just want to leave it at that the key takeaway for me for good governance is understanding the process of decision making, understanding the process of decision implementation. So those two are key to ensure that you have effective good governance in any organization, in any sector, or in any environment. Thank you very much for